Welcome back everyone to Formula 1 2020 and welcome to your race review for the rather enjoyable 2020 Eifel Grand Prix, round 11 of the season, a day which could be record-breaking. First up, Lewis Hamilton on the edge of matching Michael Schumacher's record of 91 Formula 1 Grand Prix victories. Kimi Raikkonen, if he started the Grand Prix, would get the official record of most Grand Prix starts in history. Yesterday though, your starting grid looked like this, with Valtteri Bottas bossing qualifying a quarter of a second in front of teammate Lewis Hamilton. Max Verstappen would line up alongside Charles Leclerc on row 2, the Monegasque driver having a fantastic drive on Saturday. Albon 5th, Daniel Ricciardo in P6, Ocon, Norris, Perez and Carlos Sainz your top 10. The option to start on the alternate strategy didn't tempt the majority of the bottom half of the grid, only Romain Grosjean deciding to start on the medium compound tyres, but on row 6 Vettel lined up alongside Gasly, row 7 Kvyat and Giovinazzi, the two Haas cars joint on row 8, Russell Latifi row 9 and Raikkonen and Nico Hülkenberg rounded up your grid. What a race it was. It was a race with a little bit of everything really. We even saw a very tiny, and I'm talking very tiny, amount of rain about 20 laps into the Grand Prix. Never amounted to anything really, which could have been so good. But anyway, the race we did get, I thoroughly enjoyed. Spoiler warning out of the way, here is your result for the Eifel Grand Prix. And indeed, Lewis Hamilton took the victory and ultimately equals the record of the most amount of Formula 1 Grand Prix victories in history. A relatively unchallenged drive thanks to teammate Valtteri Bottas retiring midway through the Grand Prix. A late safety car gave Max Verstappen an opportunity, but that Red Bull not quite quick enough today. However, it was quick enough for fastest lap on the final lap of the Grand Prix. P3 for the first time since Monaco 2018, and for the Enstone team the first time since Belgium 2015, it's a podium for Renault. A podium for Daniel Ricciardo. What a drive from the Aussie, thoroughly deserved, not just from today, but from the entire season so far. The man hunting him down, just missing out on his first podium of the season, Sergio Perez, P4. Carlos Sainz, a quiet day, struggling a little bit in P5, not happy with the new upgrade. Pierre Gasly, another great drive from the Frenchman, just in front of his great friend Charles Leclerc. Hülkenberg, another one, doing an absolute barnstorming Grand Prix, P20, not only to point, but 8th place, mega drive from the Hulk. Grosjean, for the first time since Germany last year, finally scores points in 2020, and for only the second time this season, Giovinazzi in the top 10. Lots of stories to get through already, and your bottom half of the field looks like this. Sebastian Vettel, an eventful race, just missing out at the checkered flag, P11 for him. Kimi Raikkonen in the wars on his record-breaking day, P12 for the Finnish man. Magnussen, P13, could have had points, but a late mistake, missing the final chicane, dropping behind Raikkonen. Fighting with Sebastian Vettel also cost him dearly as well. Latifi 14th and Danny Kvyat, your final runner, P15. Your non-finishers, Norris, Albon, Ocon, Bottas and George Russell. Heading on over then to the race report, the race rundown, the debrief, whatever you want to call it. There's lots to go through, so rather than starting at the front, rather than starting at the back, I'm going to go through it team by team. I think that's the best way to do it, because I want to start with the record breaker himself, the man who has the most wins in Formula 1 history, joint with Michael Schumacher, Lewis Hamilton. Not one of his best weekends, not one of his greatest drives, but a special weekend. A weekend where Valtteri Bottas not only deserved the victory after yesterday and after his real gutsy elbows out first couple of corners, but a race where Bottas was controlling the Grand Prix. Ultimately, Bottas retiring halfway through the race gave Hamilton an opportunity, and goodness, did he take it. Comfortably out in front. Verstappen was able late on to give him a little bit of a challenge on the safety car restart, but we know this isn't Hamilton's first rodeo. He knew exactly what he was doing on that restart, nailed it, left Verstappen in the dust, and actually it was Ricciardo pressuring Verstappen on the restart. Hamilton in a world of his own for those final few laps, and I think really just taking in the moment. You could kind of see when he was doing the post-race interviews with David Coulthard, I think he was a little bit teary there. I think when he received that helmet from Mick Schumacher, a lovely gesture from the Schumacher family, I think it's really starting to hit him now, just how incredible these achievements are. And you can say what you want about how great the car is, how great the team is. You can compare drivers if you really want to. It's not something I'm a big fan of. But you can't take away from the achievement, the career Lewis Hamilton is having, and fair play to him. Is he going to claim 7 this year? Most likely. Is this a weekend where probably it should have gone to Valtteri Bottas? Yes, indeed, but Lewis Hamilton takes the points, takes another huge step towards a 7th world title, and it's actually Max Verstappen, after another incredible drive for him, closing in Bottas in the standings. And for Max, it's another weekend where you can't really ask much more of him. That Red Bull is not as good as the Mercedes. He's not got a teammate to be that rear gunner to give them those slightly different strategy opportunities. You know, if Alex Albon was there, maybe they could have gone with an undercut a little bit earlier, or just tried something different. I suppose they did try something unique with Alex ridiculously early on. But for Verstappen, a solid drive. I said a second ago, closing in Bottas, getting that fastest lap point, another really strong weekend. The other side of the garage, though, it's a little bit difficult to comment. Not a great race. Really not a great race from Alex Albon. Started P5, dropped back behind Daniel Ricciardo on the opening few laps. Red Bull tried something different with the strategy, and it's not the first time we've seen them do that with Alex Albon, but I think what they're looking for from Albon is, if he's going to get stuck in traffic, rather than him get stuck behind Ricciardo and get frustrated, get caught in the dirty air, what they can do is put him to the back of the field, get him on some new tyres, and at least give him an opportunity, first of all, to try something different, and also to prove his ability at overtaking, carving his way through the field. And sadly for Albon, that kind of was his Achilles heel today. Whereas we're so used to him being so good at overtaking, he got caught up with the AlphaTauris. First of all, getting stuck behind Danny Kvyat and Pierre Gasly, eventually got past Kvyat after Kvyat made a mistake, hopping over the final chicane. Albon thought he'd got the move done, but came over a little bit too early. Crashed into Kvyat's front wing. Kvyat's front wing ripped right off, and Albon actually quite lucky that he didn't get any kind of damage, any kind of puncture. No news yet on why he retired, but that may have been a slight cause. I highly doubt it, because he did carry on going for another 10-15 laps, and somewhat bizarrely got hit with a 5-second penalty, whereas Kimi Raikkonen was caught with a 10-second penalty. Thoughts on that in the comments. I'm a little bit unsure why they've got 2 different penalties, but I suppose George Russell did have to retire, whereas Kvyat just about was able to carry on. Anyway, Alex then hunts down Pierre Gasly, and you know there's beef, you know there's history, and Albon just couldn't seem to get it done. Tried to move into turn 1, an audacious move into turn 1, locked up for, well, not even the first time in the Grand Prix. Did it on lap 1 against Ricciardo. He did it a little bit later on, I think, again chasing down Ricciardo 10 or so laps into the race. Several lockups already hurt him on those first sets, so this brand new set, hunting down Gasly, completely ruined that set. Came on the radio, and I really don't think this was sensible to say. He wasn't happy how much the AlphaTauris were racing him. And from a standpoint where, yeah, they're the sister team, get out of the way, I can understand why he was frustrated, but putting that on the world feed, making it known he kind of needed a little bit of help, you know, for those drivers to maybe get out of the way, I don't think it's going to do him much favours. I also wonder, from a Helmut Marko point of view, what kind of things that's going to start stirring up in his mind, because Gasly and Kvyat were doing some great defensive manoeuvres, and I just wonder whether those question marks, which kind of went away after the Tuscan Grand Prix, are slowly starting to seep in again, and you just wonder, That feeling, we saw it last year with Gasly. We all hate it. We just would wish one of those drivers to get in and get that consistency for Red Bull to, wrap their shoulder around one driver, but it just doesn't seem to be working at the moment. Ricciardo on the podium today, I'm sure they'd be looking at that. Happy for Daniel, but also knowing in that period since Ricciardo's left, that car has only got one podium. Ricciardo at Renault has also got one podium. So yeah, I think more question marks this weekend from Albon after what's been a very up and down season. Not a great race today. Retiring halfway through the Grand Prix. We're not too sure why, but up to that point, hadn't served that 5-second penalty. I don't really think it would have got much better. Third team, I guess we should probably talk about Renault. Finally for Danny Ric on the podium. And whereas last season wasn't great, it was slowly starting to get better at the end of the year. And though Ricciardo announced he would be leaving the team at the end of the season, before this season had even began, what a year it's been. And actually for Daniel, what a consistent season it's been. Whereas other drivers and other teams have had really big results, they've had podiums, Renault hadn't had that yet, and still they were hanging on in there in the drivers with Ricciardo and also the constructors. So today's result, I think it's fair to say, was a long time coming and thoroughly deserved. A drive where we all knew in those early stages he had to get past Leclerc, and he eventually did it, got on his way, and after that never really looked back. Perez started to close him in with 15 or so laps to go. About half a second a lap wasn't quite enough, but it was certainly going to be on the edge. Nevertheless, safety car really threw a spanner in the works. Ricciardo came in. Perez initially didn't, had track position. The team eventually then did decide to bring him in, and actually on the restart, Ricciardo had a great restart fighting Max Verstappen. Nobody expected that. After that, had to settle behind him, take third place. Perez never really was able to challenge him. A great drive from Ricciardo. Thoroughly deserves it with this season. And again, today's race also really, really impressive from the Honey Badger. Cyril, we haven't stopped hearing about this tattoo. I'm sure we'll see what it is over the next few weeks. But I think for him as well, that's a big sigh of relief, a big step forward for the team. And for old Nando Alonso, I'm sure he'll be watching today's race with a big smile on his face. Someone who's probably not too happy is Esteban Ocon. Was chilling in about P7. A quiet race, had gone back behind Sergio Perez, wasn't it? Got caught behind the Mexican. Wasn't really challenging forward, but was just, letting the race unfold. Engine power unit issue, race over. And that would have been big points for Ocon today. With Ricciardo on the podium, that car had some solid pace. And whereas the rest of the Renault team are probably going to be so excited, so buzzing after that result, I'm sure Ocon maybe not too much. Behind them, Sergio Perez, the Racing Point team, they can be thrilled with today's performances. Not only from Sergio, 4th place, his best of the season, close to a podium. Not quite, they're going to have to wait a little bit longer for Checo to score his first podium since Baku 2018, I believe it is. But a great drive from Sergio. And still, he probably won't get real recognition than his teammate, Nico Hülkenberg. We know the story by now. Came in as the super sub. Last second, jumped in for qualifying out in Q1. So heading into the race today, he had done 10 minutes more or less worth of laps. And to go into a Grand Prix, dead last, not having driven this car pretty much at all, thanks to all the upgrades it's had on since Britain, to race like that, to race as hard as he did, but also to get a result like that, mega drive from Hülkenberg. He doesn't move up in the standings at all, but he does take his tally from 6 points to 10 points. I don't think there's really much more he could have asked for him. Got his elbows out, really tried to fight those drivers in front of him. And whereas they were probably quite disappointed, the team, that Lance Stroll wasn't going to be able to score a big heap of points for the team, I think that was a really strong drive from Hülkenberg. And actually, when you look at the overall result for the team today, jumping in front of McLaren in the team standings, they're going to be elated with that. McLaren themselves, Sainz with the upgrade, a quiet race for him, not really much more he could have done. P5, solid points, still outside the top 10 in the standings. And Lando Norris, who made a bullet of a start, jumping up behind Daniel Ricciardo, right in that fight with Sergio Perez. Engine issues again for Renault, power unit issues in that McLaren forced him out of the Grand Prix, and a new deck chair meme potentially for Lando Norris. Pierre Gasly P6, Danny Kvyat down in P15. Very contrasting fortunes considering the fact early stages pretty much neck and neck. Fighting with Albon though sent Kvyat to the back of the field. Gasly though, another awesome drive in 2020, really daring on the brakes, some dangerously good overtakes as well. You love to see it from him, really coming into his own in 2020, and it's another weekend. Albon struggled, Gasly has done really, really well. Ferrari, another mixed bag of a team with Leclerc scoring points, P7 for Charles, P11 for Sebastian Vettel. Leclerc, I suppose a little bit like Gasly, had to get his elbows out, had to be daring, had to be gutsy today. Did exactly that. The car in race trim wasn't as good as it was in qualifying trim, and though 7th will be disappointing compared to yesterday, they'll take it with the carnage that was going on with safety cars, with poor tyre management, I would say, from Ferrari, though good strategy overall from the team. Sebastian, another difficult race, had that spin almost running into the back of Giovinazzi, tried to do a bit of a dummy into turn 1, really didn't pay off, managed to recover, was in that fight right up until the end to get some points, didn't quite come to fruition. Hülkenberg 8th, Grosjean 9th. 2 points for Grosjean, now puts him in front of Magnussen, joint with Raikkonen. He deserved that result this season. I've been quite vocal that he's been strong this year. Nothing incredible. I'm not talking about he's been in the top 10 drivers of the year, but he's been the most consistent Grosjean I think we have ever seen at Haas. It's not been spectacular. It's not been any drives where he's getting close to points without carnage going on. But he's managed to stay in Grand Prix. There's been no silly crashes, although he did seem to break his finger in this Grand Prix. Slightly unique for Formula 1, with some gravel from Raikkonen getting thrown up at the early stages of the race. An audacious strategy, mediums to hards, the only driver to do it, and goodness me, did it pay off. 2 massive points, not only for Grosjean, also for the team, still behind Alfa Romeo, but just gives them that little bit of a cushion now to Williams. And for Grosjean, what a confidence boost that's going to be for him. Giovinazzi also just drove a really good weekend, did Antonio. He's someone under pressure with that Ferrari Junior Academy, those boys knocking on the door for a race seat. But Antonio really composed himself yesterday, and today converting it to points, a really strong drive. Magnussen made that mistake, ultimately skipping that final chicane, losing out to Sebastian Vettel and Raikkonen. Magnussen also had a bit of a ding-dong with Sebastian Vettel through that turn 1, pretty much turn 2 into turn 3 complex. Vettel squeezing him out wide. It's the nature of the corner, a slight tyre bash and tyre rub. A little bit cheeky, no penalties, fair enough. Hard racing, and Magnussen, he's done plenty of that in his time, so I'm sure he won't be too upset with how that panned out, but no points for K-Mag. Kimi Raikkonen, record-breaking day, had a bit more of a ding-dong than Vettel and Magnussen. He went, well, straight into the side of George Russell into turn 1, while also Russell was fighting Sebastian Vettel. Russell out on the spot, Raikkonen able to keep going, lost a bit of his front wing during the Grand Prix, I think thanks to that contact. However, Raikkonen, we know he's doing it for a hobby, and apart from that contact, I actually think he had a really good race, and that overtake on Kevin Magnussen at the hairpin, overtake of the Grand Prix. I know Magnussen was struggling after that contact with Seb, but still, in these wide Formula 1 cars, getting them side by side through the circuit anyway was a little bit on the tricky side. So overtaking at the hairpin, Kimi, old boy, you've not lost it yet. And the final team we've got to just quickly mention is Williams. Russell having a good race, and actually when you see Grosjean and Giovinazzi in the points, maybe this was that day for George Russell and Williams to score. Didn't quite pan out like that. That contact with Raikkonen giving Russell a puncher out on the spot. Latifi having a quiet race and ultimately 14th at the checkered flag. And that is your race rundown with Lewis Hamilton, your race victor. Before we jump into our race rating and driver of the day, no Formula 2 report this weekend. First, let's take a quick look at your updated drivers' standings. Lewis Hamilton extends his lead at the top, 230 points. Valtteri Bottas all the way back on 161. Verstappen closing in on 147. That fight for fourth, the one we are glued to this season. Ricciardo takes fourth place after that incredible podium today, 10 points clear of Sergio Perez in P5. No scores for Norris, no scores for Albon, puts them down in 6th and 7th. Leclerc overtakes Stroll and up to P8, but Stroll not racing this weekend, P9. Pierre Gasly holding on in the top 10. Sainz P5 today gives him a comfortable gap now over Esteban Ocon, who also didn't score in P12. Sebastian Vettel hanging on in P13. Danny Kvyat closing in, and Nico Hülkenberg scoring leaves him only 7 points behind his fellow German Sebastian Vettel. Giovinazzi overtakes Kimi Raikkonen thanks to that point today. Grosjean moves from last up to 18th with those 2 points. Magnussen 19th, Latifi and Russell the only two yet to score. In the Constructors' Championship, every single team except one scored today. Mercedes continue their dominance. Racing Point overtake McLaren for P3. Haas extend their lead over Williams. And sadly, the only team yet to score today and the only team yet to score in 2020 is Williams. Right then, driver of the day and race rating before we go. Driver of the day. It's a tricky one. Yesterday we gave it to Charles Leclerc, Bottas in the mix. But today, I think I'm going to give it to Nico Hülkenberg. A fantastic drive with such limited running heading into this session. Really a fantastic performance. He has to be on the grid next season. Come on guys, give the Hulk a seat. And also Pierre Gasly, throw in the mix. Daniel Ricciardo, Lewis Hamilton, Max Verstappen, Charles Leclerc as well. My driver of the weekend. Great in quali and finally picking up that podium. Daniel Ricciardo, the Honey Badger on top. Team Enstone back on the podium. Renault back on the podium. A magical weekend. And overall, Ricciardo really taking control on that fight for best of the rest. And my race rating, I really enjoyed our return to the Nürburgring. Without that safety car, without those retirements, without that little sprinkle of rain, maybe it wouldn't have been quite such a good Grand Prix. But we did get all of that. We did get those dramas. We did get that little sprinkle of rain. I loved it. And I really hope we come back in the future. 7 out of 10 for me. Pushing 8 slightly, but no, I'm happy with 7. I'd love to know your thoughts in the comment section down below. And that is your lot here in Germany for the 2020 Eifel Grand Prix. Don't worry if you've been enjoying these crazy new venues, because in 2 weeks' time we head back to Portugal to a venue Formula 1 has never raced at before. Portimao, 2 weeks' time. Imola the week after that. Hamilton, will he take the crown of most victories of all time? We're just going to have to wait and see. If you are new, I hope you enjoyed today's review. Feel free to subscribe if you haven't done so already. Thank you all very much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.